All right, so this week we were going to this one was going to kind of bleed into the last Disney one we did, but we weren't quite sure how to do it until we decided just to kind of separate everything. So now we're getting these two because, to be perfectly honest, these two are two of the, I guess you could say, Disney classics that I didn't really grow up familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since Disney tried to make it impossible to grow up with the Black Cauldron because of their whole. A lot of people say that Disney almost tried to sweep it under the rug because they were scared about how people would react to its dark content. So it didn't even get a video release, I think, until 1998, over 10 years after it came out.
I wonder when Disney was more scared, with the Black Cauldron back then or the Song of the South now.
Oh, God. Something tells me the movie that I think is technically still banned is probably, it reminds me of the John Mulaney bit. It's like, if that's the one that's not actually able to be seen, it's probably that one.
Yeah, I don't even, is it on Disney Plus? I don't remember.
What's that?
Song of the South?
I don't think so. I think it's still banned technically. I don't know the history on that very well. So somebody will angrily correct me, I'm sure. But what I was getting ready to say was, since I didn't grow up with these, and even though I do know the Black Cauldron is known for how dark it is, and the Sword in the Stone is so light, especially by comparison. For some reason, even despite that in mind, I would get these confused a lot.
Yeah.
Even though the Sword in the Stone is very self-explanatory. So that may also have to do with the fact that it's not even really about the Sword in the Stone until like 5 minutes until it's over.
Yeah, we get the background throughout the whole thing, and then it's just like, oh, look, a sword and a stone.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, Arthur, I know that name. It's like, Merlin, I know that name. Kay, I know that name. Oh, yeah, I forgot. This is the Arthur story. I still forgot. And the Black Cauldron is just kind of, it's based on like a series of stories or books or something. But apart from that, I'm obviously, as far as history goes, not entirely familiar with them.
Yeah.
So this is going to kind of be, we were talking, and it's going to be like, there's only so much to say, especially about the Sword and the Stone, despite how beloved it is, because it's so kind of thin in what it is.
It's disgustingly simple.
and really episodic, too.
Yeah.
And doesn't even break an hour and 20 minutes. It's like an hour 18 or something, which back then was actually relatively normal for animation. Like, I think the Jungle Book's only about that runtime also. The Great Mouse Detective is only about that long. Unfortunately. The Great Mouse Detective could have been 2 hours, and I would have been very happy with that. But, yeah, so did we go ahead and just kind of start with the Sword and the Stone? Because there's kind of a question I wanted to ask you and get your opinion on. I've brought it up a few times in other videos, but I don't know if I've ever asked you directly in one.
Okay.
Because I kind of talked about it when I did my Lion King Jungle Book video, speaking of the Jungle Book. And it involves the feeling I get when I watch The Sword and the Stone.
Okay.
What do you think about this criticism where I have a pretty concrete opinion on this opinion, but the people that basically, where you like, because like I said, we didn't grow up with Sword and Stone, but a lot of people did. And those people that grew up with it and love it probably still love it now.
Yeah.
But if people want to criticize the movie and criticize his opinions, they might say nostalgia is the only reason people still like whatever they like. What do you think about that whole thing of the people that use nostalgia to basically dismiss a movie or people's love for a movie? And what does it even mean to say that? Exactly.
I think it's just one of those cases where, like, for example, beer is an acquired taste. You have to drink it repeatedly before you start to enjoy it. But when you first try it, it might taste disgusting. I think nostalgia works the same way for a movie. You know, you grow up with it and you just keep it stays in your childhood and you just see it over and over and over again, and eventually it grows on you. Or if you watch it, you know, it might not be necessarily the movie, it might just take you back to a happier time.
That's kind of what I'm getting at with The Sword and the Stone, because it's like the movie is so paper thin.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly doesn't reach heights that animated Disney movies have in their classic era and in their Renaissance era, and I guess you could say for the most part in their current era.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, for me personally, it's just kind of there.
Yeah.
But when I see like the animation and the way the characters interact and the way they are, there's just something that takes me to a place about that, to where I could just, even though I don't, I could just watch this movie anytime, and I would like the place that it kind of takes me from like this deep emotional point.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also the case, because that's coming from somebody that didn't grow up with this movie. But it's like, is it the nostalgia of the era itself that's blinding me, one might say.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the other flaw in that argument is that there are a ton of movies that a lot of people grew up with that they will go back to and say didn't age at all. Like, age well at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so there's a clear difference. When I brought this up before, it was when I was talking about The Lion King, where I said, it's not a I just grew up with it and I'm familiar with it and it brings back those old feelings. It's like there's something that I still to this day feel every single time I watch The Lion King, and that's an immeasurable amount of times to see one movie. How many times I've seen The Lion King, and all of the emotional beats in The Lion King still hit exactly as they always have, with as much strength. So if this can just give me a feeling of a certain era, and like I can still feel that even about a movie I'm not entirely crazy about, there's something worthwhile here.
You know, I think you could take that a step further, and you know, movies remind people of simpler times, especially nostalgic factors. I feel like that's the reason that Disney Plus is so successful, because I think that's Disney Plus as an app in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You scroll through all these movies and you're like, God, I remember that. Man, I remember when that was out. I remember this. I mean, Disney Plus is a giant nostalgia factory.
And appropriately enough, I've exactly heard that criticism about it. Where it's like, I fall into that camp. Like, there's when I looked at Disney Plus, there was so much stuff where I just kept thinking, I can't wait to rewatch this stuff. I haven't seen this stuff. It's been so long since I've seen this stuff. I have almost no memories of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I used it to watch fucking Tall Tale with Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
Which we saw at the drive-in. I hadn't seen it since then.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna check this out, and it was great. I mean, the movie's not great, but the experience of revisiting something I hadn't seen since I went to the drive-in when I was 5 is, there's a feeling there. But of course, you have those people that say they hate Disney Plus for being successful because they say it's just Disney cashing in on nostalgia like they always do.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't get, I mean, this is kind of going off the movies we're talking about, but it's like, I think another reason it doesn't make sense to me is when people use that excuse for the live action remakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's Disney cashing in on nostalgia. And it's like, if they were cashing on nostalgia, wouldn't they just re-release the movies as they were?
Yeah.
It's a weird argument.
Star Wars, James Cameron.
I mean, I get where they're coming from, because it's like, because the remakes are going to try to hit the same beats.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's just weird to me, that whole.
Speaking of James Cameron and Disney Plus being in the same conversation, I really want to watch that Titanic documentary that James Cameron does on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah. Is it like a new one, or is it like Ghost in the Abyss?
I think it's a newer one. I think. Because it's called like Back to the Titanic. I think that's the one James Cameron did. I'll have to look again.
So about the Sword in the Stone, before we get
You mean you mean Wild Facial Hair the movie?
yeah,
Like you said that when our dad was up and him and I went to play golf, he said that my beard was impressive. Is that what he said? Or no, he told me it was impressive. He told you it was awesome, right?
yeah.
I don't have anything on Merlin.
Which is really funny because apparently Merlin kind of in general apparently was based on Disney without his knowledge.
Huh.
And it's like I guess because of his demeanor, but also in like just the way, like the like joyful way that he was about whatever he was doing. But it's like you also imagine just a small, very minor piece of facial hair when you think of Disney, and Merlin just. I mean, of
Like
course,
whenever like in Harry Potter when Jim Broadbent says Merlin's beard, that's the one he's referring to. It has to be. But it's not just Merlin's beard. The little dude that comes in and tells him about the tournament whenever he gets juice on his mustache, it just wiggles by itself. That dude, the other dude with the red hair, Kane's dad, has a wild ass mustache. Oh, fun little fact. Did you know that the little dude that wiggles his mustache like that tells him about the tournament is voiced by Alfred from the Adam West Batman?
no.
Look that shit up. Because I saw his name in the credits. And I was like, because I always remember his last name's Napier because it was funny that they made Joker Jack Napier in '89. So that's probably like a shout out or something. So I looked it up, and then I looked it up before I watched the movie, saw who he was playing, and then I watched the movie, and it made it funnier.
This would have been right around that time too. This was what 63.
I think so. It was just before.
Yeah, so that's another thing I think it has a lot of significance of is the fact that this is something we can't necessarily relate to, but the idea that this is probably how a lot of kids like first heard the Arthur story, or at least like variations of it or pieces of it.
It was definitely like the version that you find that is at the kids section of the library that's about 20 pages long. It's about that version of the Arthur story.
Yeah. Wow, that brought a lot of flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was one of those cases where this story is as ancient as it is, and even not having necessarily grown up with the movie, there was still a very long period of childhood where when I heard the name Merlin, I saw this animated version in my head.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but when you said this animated version, I thought you were going to say, when I heard Merlin, I thought of this gentleman right here.
Well, that also.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird he's not pictured on the cover of this DVD.
It is very strange.
Oh, he's on the back, but the back is just a picture of him. So
Oh.
made up.
Mm-hmm.
And Archimedes looking very angry.
Dude, Archimedes is a fucking grouch throughout the whole movie. All Archimedes does is piss and moan.
But at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for?
Mm.
There's a lot of forcing around. There's
Mm.
because that's kind of where
Forcing around. What a nice old phrase to use for an old movie.
I feel like there's an even more old-fashioned one I'm not thinking of on my head. There's one that's like right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't think of what it is.
All I can think of is horseplay, tomfoolery.
Tomfoolery might be what I'm thinking of. It's like this will be one of those movies where you could have a totally different perspective on it if you try to picture it solely from Archimedes' perspective.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a point I want to bring up is when you look at like the classic era, which I would say, I talked about this when I talked about the Jungle Book. I'm not quite sure where the classic era ends per se, because I want to say the Renaissance era started with The Little Mermaid.
I think the Disney Renaissance is credited for being The Little Mermaid through maybe Hercules.
I'll say that, or Tarzan might have just squeezed in.
Yeah, because I think The Emperor's New Groove kind of starts a new era because, like we talked about, it just goes balls to the wall compared to Disney before.
Yeah, and just did its own thing. Whereas here, you can tell there's like, especially in this particular era, there's kind of a kinship in the movies that were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you can kind of get that, and I use that also in like its defense because if I remember correctly, there's a lot of like as far as how it was made, there's a lot reused from like Sleeping Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping Beauty was like 59, I think, so it was like 4 years prior.
Yeah.
And there was like apparently Archimedes' look is like literally an owl that was in the forest in Sleeping Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when Madame Mim turns into the dragon is sort of like Maleficent. I think they even use like the same backgrounds and everything. And if you just say that, it might sound kind of like almost cheap.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of cutting down on whatever, but it's like I kind of like the idea of these movies having that sort of like kinship. And I know it's weird for me to praise kinship over comparison when we're literally doing a versus. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like it's kind of like the animated Disney movies were doing the MCU before the MCU was.
Yeah. Technically, Pixar kind of still does because there's always the hidden like Easter eggs and stuff, like all the Pizza.
I think the Pizza Planet truck is in damn near every movie.
Yeah, I think so, and they put those little things in there like Boo's Bedroom Monsters Inc. has a stuffed Nemo in it 2 years before it came out, and then when the house goes by the window and up, lots of Huggen Bears on the floor the year before Toy Story 3 came out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're always. I mean, I know it's more of an Easter egg thing rather than a cinematic universe thing, but it fits what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, the point I was going to make was talking about when you look at like the Renaissance era, and people have their arguments. Like people hate the gargoyles and Hunchback.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always funny stuff in the earlier movies, particularly a lot of slapstick things with the Seven Dwarfs, particularly with Dopey.
Yeah, Merlin is his own little slapstick factory sometimes in this movie.
I was going to say, this is almost like a middle ground where it feels like this sort of 60s era Disney was a lot more slapsticky than what came before and what came after. So you agree? I was going to ask, do you agree? I'm assuming that means yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me, now this is going to be a very strange connection, but the way Merlin is in this movie, if you would have told me that Merlin was the one that turned the genie into the genie, I'd believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's also that whole thing where we were talking about the fan theory about what exactly era is Aladdin set in.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like way in the past or is it way in the future?
Mm-hmm.
Because of all those references, and it's like with Merlin being able to see the future and making those like anachronistic references.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's something that feels like it sort of fits here, and sort of the way Genie shows up with like his goofy hat and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Feels very reminiscent of at the very end of this when Merlin shows up in his modern garb.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it does get. I feel like sometimes
I do love the way that he ends up there, and the way that they decide that's where he went. Is that he does it in a fit of rage, and then he blasts off like a rocket after he says, "Blow me to Bermuda." And then Arthur's just like, where did he go? And completely 100% serious, Archimedes is like, I think Bermuda.
See, that stuff is genuinely funny. Because I was gonna say, do you think the slapstick is there almost to a fault?
Mm-hmm.
Like when they're doing like the sort of practice jousts, and he like flies off, and there's like sound effects with it, or when like the dishes attack. I can't remember if they're attacking Kay or Hector, but they're attacking, and it's very over the top even for an animated movie in regards to how it's handled as far as the humor goes.
There is one joke though in The Sword and the Stone that I do find really funny. And I'm sure it's been done a million times, and it's probably not even one that Disney like looks at as like a forefront joke in that movie. I love the running joke of the fucking shithole that Merlin is staying in. Like anytime something happens, it starts to creak and rock back and forth. That's funny. Like I find that to be funny.
And using the umbrella to stop the rain from getting it.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting. I kind of seem like I talk a little bit down on the '60s era of Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Let us not forget. Was it 2 years before this? Was one of my favorite animated Disney movies of all time. One of my favorite Disney movies of all time. Period.
Mm-hmm.
With 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah.
I always end up forgetting where it lands, but I'm pretty sure it's 61. I think. So it was between this and Sleeping Beauty then. So I'm not big on. I did a video on Sleeping Beauty a while back. I'm not big on Sleeping Beauty either.
Sleeping Beauty is a one-character show.
Yeah, and then obviously Cinderella is considered one of the great classics, but Cinderella couldn't even stop focusing on the mice to even give a shit about Cinderella.
Oh man, I was trying to figure that out for you. I googled 101 Dalmatians because I was like, oh, it'll just tell me. It was 61. But I was like, oh, it'll just tell me when it is. When you search 101 Dalmatians on Google, the first thing that comes up and the thing it focuses on is the live-action remake.
For some reason, I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw fucking Psycho Glenn Close when you first Googled it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is we talk about.
I think Cruella de Vil and the villain and rescuers took driving classes together.
I was actually getting ready to mention how there's also some similarities here that I'm sure aren't exactly accidental. Like the whole thing about the enchanted dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously has very much Fantasia overtones.
I think that's why we purposely cut to the mops too.
Yeah, and then there's some cases, especially during like the songs, where Merlin does really, even though Merlin's a character in general that's been around since forever,
Mm-hmm.
I do get vibes of the fairy godmother.
Yeah.
There's even the whole thing about making a big stink about cleaning is very Snow White. Like it all feels reminiscent of something else that Disney already did. Yet somehow, like I said, it feels more like it's a brotherhood of movies as opposed to just saying, "Oh, we're out of ideas, so we're just going to do the same thing."
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that it could have, that it kind of relates to, in a weird, strange way, like how Merlin kind of gives me genie vibes, and I know it's probably a complete coincidence, but isn't it kind of funny that exactly 40 years before it came out, there was a part of a Disney animated movie that focused on a blue and orange fish swimming around together.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. I'm like, how have I been so blind this whole time? I was like, what came out in 2003? Oh, Jesus. Of course.
The fucking tag-along frog. He can't get his own fucking life.
Who looks a lot like one of the frogs from the pond in The Brave Little Toaster. Even though The Brave Little Toaster didn't start off as a Disney movie, Disney bought it from Sundance. But
and he moves like his movements that are like human-like are like Prince Naveen. Is The Sword and the Stone the portal to all things Disney?
I was going to say, there is something that they got to first, if I remember correctly. The Oscar-nominated score is by the Sherman Brothers, who are pretty much synonymous with Disney.
Yeah.
Who were pretty much like the sound in Disney scores before Alan Menken.
Yeah.
And I believe this was their first Disney collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's where it started something, as opposed to seeming like it was sort of borrowing.
I love how, like, I hadn't seen the Sword in the Stone in years, to the point where I couldn't even remember how it ended. I forgot that Merlin comes back from his trip. What?
I was like, well, he pulls the sword out of the stone. But
well, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, after he's done all that.
Yeah.
And he's like, shit, I'm king. So you think, oh, there's going to be a little bit of an arc here. Merlin shows back up, and he's like, oh, yeah, you're king. He laughs about it. He's like, of course. And then Arthur's like, I don't know how to be king. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're going to see Merlin teach him how to be credits.
I do like how we get that little...
It's one of the most abruptly ended Disney movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, because it almost feels like everything after he pulls the sword out isn't supposed to be there. Like, it's supposed to end on, you're king now. We're not supposed to see him being too small for the throne and his crown doesn't fit. And
mm-hmm.
Every time he goes out a door, they're cheering for him.
Like, I feel like, I don't know how this joke's going to be perceived, but I feel like the animator, or the person telling the story, was telling the story to the animating team. And they were like, you know, Arthur's now king, and Merlin comes back from Bermuda, and they're talking about how he's not sure how to be king. And then he got a bad spout of diarrhea, went in the bathroom, and died, and everybody just thought that was the end of the story. Like, that's what I feel like happened.
He went full Ned Beatty in life.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
I don't know how many people get that reference that will watch a Sword in the Stone video, but there it is anyway. We just brought up lots of Hug and Bear, so it's still here. We're still connected.
But do you feel that way? Did you feel like that it, like, had, like, a very abrupt ending to it?
Yeah. And like I said, it starts off almost like they go past the ending, which would be the opposite of that. But then when they do finally end, it's like, oh, all right.
It's like somebody opened a door and realized they were watching something they weren't supposed to because the story had ended and it was time to be done following them, and then they shut the door real quick. I'm surprised. You know what? I'm surprised with all of the, I could be wrong that this exists, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Disney Plus has nothing. I am surprised that there was never, even straight to video, a Sword in the Stone 2 about Merlin helping Arthur being king.
Yeah.
I am shocked that never happened, especially as loved as that movie is.
Yeah, they'll make Disney sequels about anything. Like, wasn't Bambi 2 about some competition or something?
Maybe.
It's something really random like that.
And then Pocahontas 2, they tried to tell the real story of Pocahontas, but still kind of gave it a light thing, which Pocahontas 2 showed some promise when you think that John Smith gets axed off in the first 5 minutes. It's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. I'll stick around for this ride. And it does have, like, the really tall Indian dude that's hilarious, but...
I do notice something the Sword in the Stone and the Black Cauldron have in common. Is their villain climaxes happen relatively early. Like, it feels pretty uncommon that there's still a good 10 minutes left of both movies when the villains are dealt with.
Dude, the villain is... This is one of the few movies I've seen where the villain is introduced in the climax, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like they were alluded to. Like, Madam Mim comes out of fucking nowhere.
But
I was listening and I was trying to think back. I don't think Merlin ever mentions her prior to their meeting. Like, he's never like, oh, watch out for Madam Mim, or, yeah, I knew this dark wizard once. No, she's just like, but he knows who she is. Archimedes even knew who she was. Because Archimedes flipped his shit.
The last time I submitted a script to the blacklist, one of the things they said was a problem was I introduced the villain too late. And I never hinted it when he was coming, even though I did the whole thing. But I was like, now that you mention it, it's like, okay, Maybe I should direct them towards Madam Mim.
Yeah.
Be like, that's been happening since 1963, and they seem to be doing just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of, it is interesting that, to my understanding, it was considered like a pretty great accomplishment in animation when Merlin and Madame Mim are battling, like the way they're like changing forms, but they keep like their same features.
That is really cool.
Yeah, apparently that was like a big deal in regards to animation, like at the time.
Oh, they should have been proud of that accomplishment because it is really cool.
Yeah.
How like whenever they animate them into animals, they still keep those features. That's really cool that they do that because the squirrels and the fish were the same way.
Yeah.
And I love how most of Merlin's forms keep his mustache.
Yeah.
You know what I kind of feel like when he's the squirrel, when Merlin's the squirrel, I kind of feel like he looks like the girl's dad in The Great Mouse Detective.
Flowerson?
Yeah, the Gary Oldman mouse.
Yeah, he does.
And for those watching, no, Gary Oldman does not voice that mouse. That mouse just looks like Gary Oldman.
I was gonna say you were gonna have people googling, which is really funny because it actually sounds like it could be current Gary Oldman, but Great Mouse Detective was the same year as Sid and Nancy, so it definitely was.
Dude, if the Great Mouse Detective gets a live action remake, call Gary Oldman.
People are gonna be so pissed at you for giving them the idea to even do that.
I know, because they're not going to be able to replace Vincent Price.
Yeah. Like I said, even getting Chiwetel, you can't replace Jeremy Irons. So it's like,
Yeah.
all right.
And I'd be afraid of what they do. Like, no offense to this actor whatsoever. I love this actor, but I could see them like making Ratigan somebody like Jim Broadbent.
Yeah,
And I just don't know that Jim Broadbent is sinister enough.
he would be in his own way, but there's just something so particular about Ratigan and Vincent Price.
And there's just something so endearing about Jim Broadbent. Like, you see Jim Broadbent, you just want to give the dude a hug because he just seems so endearing.
Until the end of Hot Fuzz.
Until the end of Hot Fuzz, or... Yeah, till the end of Hot Fuzz. Well, he could be kind of a dick in Moulin Rouge.
Yeah. All right. Do we move on? Do we go ahead and go on to the Black Cauldron? I think we've more or less summed up the Sword and the Stone.
Yeah, I see why people like it, but it's very, like... I don't think it would be as well received if it came out today.
Yeah, and it would definitely be, because the interesting thing about this is that I feel like both do it just fine as far as their tones go.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like people, back in the 80s, particularly at Disney, were freaking out about how dark the movie was, to the point that I think scenes are cut out of it, I think.
Hmm.
So the thing is it's like that they were so terrified of that, but it's like darkness in these kind of movies became the norm kind of a long time ago, kind of at the beginning of the Renaissance, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when Gaston's about to fall to his death and there are skulls in his eyes, I feel like was kind of the turning point. and then the Lion King just
I don't know. I see where a lot of people find that to be the turning point, but for a Disney movie, I'm sorry, Oliver and Company having the villain get whacked by a train in his limousine is pretty out there too.
Yeah, and we're totally dismissing. We've been talking about this whole time. The climax of The Great Mouse Detective is brutal.
Mm-hmm. You know what other Disney movie? This is considered a Renaissance movie, but one of the Disney movies that has another really good climax. The Little Mermaid's climax is really good.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, ends in impalement. So
yeah.
See, that is weird to me. Come to think of it now, that they were so. I mean, you could argue the Black Cauldron is darker, but I mean, is it?
Look at some of the villain deaths. Scar gets eaten alive.
I heard something, and I don't know if it was somebody going way over the top trying to be edgy, or
Mhm.
it's what we're led to believe. And as many times as I've seen the movie, it was something that never, ever occurred to me. And the
Hmm.
1,000 times I've seen it and etching it in my brain.
Hmm.
And I never thought of this until somebody brought it up like last year. I never even considered it.
Hmm.
Somebody implied that because the fire rises, in the words of Bane,
Mhm.
we are led to believe that the hyenas are eating Scar alive while they're burning to death.
Good Lord.
It's
That's
like,
a lot to unpack.
but then again, we never see them again, so I don't know.
I wonder if they just pieced out.
But yeah, but now I'm confused. Come to think of it, because I get it, for the era they thought the Black Cauldron was too dark to the point that they tried to say, we can't show this mainstream. We won't release it till 1998, as far as home release. But the Great Master Decker was just the next year, and Radigan almost killing Basil, and I'm not exaggerating. Radigan almost kills Basil with his hands,
Mhm.
with his claws.
Mhm.
Like there's no blood in that scene, but there was a long time where I had a false memory that there was.
Yeah.
It's so believable. But it's like, and I guess when you think of like undead armies now, you think of like Return of the King or something.
Mhm.
So it's not like that. So I try to put my mind in 1980.
Oh, sorry. I just had a funny thought. We were talking about the escalating violence. Let's not forget that Disney was escalating in other ways. Don't forget that most of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Frollo wants to get his Spock on.
Yeah. And Disney villains have been falling to their death since the beginning of time.
The Evil Queen in Snow White fell to her death. The very first villain.
Yep. Bambi's mom getting shot. It's always been there. It's weird to me that the Black Cauldron is the one that they were like, oh my God, what are we doing? But then again,
Yeah, because falling to someone's death is so easy because you don't have to show a body.
I don't know if there's any information or not on what exactly those supposed cutscenes are.
I don't
Because
know.
let's talk about the fear that is in this movie. Let's talk about the fear that this movie can bring out. Starting with the Horned King, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Normally when we're introduced to villains, it's pretty. They're either like from a safe distance, or they're just introduced like any other character, and it's not till later we get really jarring cuts, like when we see the Queen in her old decrepit form in Snow White, and we get that little zoom, and it scares the fuck out of all the kids and us. It scares the fuck out of everybody. Kids are not the only ones. The very first time we see the Horned King, if I remember correctly, is like a close-up, and he's like reaching for the camera, and it's a really freaky shot. Not only is that shot creepy in itself to show him, it's only revealing because there's an amazing shot where we see the other side of his hand, and it kind of just continues into the scene, and we see the dead warriors that he wants to raise as his army, and it's pretty wicked looking. It almost looks like a shot out of one of the opening scenes of Coppola's Dracula, when we're getting his backstory when he was like in battle and shit. It looks almost like a shot out of that.
Yeah, the animation in the Black Cauldron is really impressive.
Yeah, and it's like it's also stuff that's not necessarily as big. Like one of the things I really love is like the animation of the well in Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking up from the water, and how amazing that must have been in 1937 to see that for the first time.
Yeah.
It's like I still get that. There's something about the way Disney does water. I think there's a really great water scene in The Jungle Book as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's that scene towards the beginning of the Black Cauldron where we get a really nice contrast where we see with the Horned King, and we see all the darkness and all the gloom and all the potential death and all the death that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cut to Arthur, Taryn, and Henwin walking through the little field, and they're down the trail, and everything is so bright and green. and
Mm-hmm.
pleasant, and the score is pleasant. And they go to that pond, and the colors of that pond are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Before he sees like his whole vision in it, even just the pond by itself is really great. They're really great about their water stuff, but obviously there's a very crucial water scene in The Lion King.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of the dead, kind of coming back. But yeah, but the way they kind of set up the darkness on top of that, where it's like, even just in dialogue also, because we have the moment when it's like wanting to send out these positive messages in movies that supposedly are meant for children, where you say like, oh, it's great to be brave and courageous and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the very beginning of this movie, Dolman says, he's talking to him and he says, I'm not afraid of the Horned King. And Dolman says, then you're foolish if you're not afraid, because he says, untried courage is no match for his evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it basically shuts down the concept of courage in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the evil is that overpowering.
Yeah. The Black Cauldron's message in the first 5 minutes should be, don't be a fucking idiot.
But I think it's also trying to, you could say the message is to dissuade arrogance, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
But still, it's like, to say right away, courage could get you killed, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're on the topic, we were talking about
They might as well have popped up like Cusco or Genie or something and like showed graphs of like the prince fighting Maleficent or somebody else doing something stupid and be like, see, death.
And speaking of the intimidation, we talked a little bit about The Sword in the Stone, and then we talked about other movies. We talked about Vincent Price and Jeremy Irons, stuff like that. Black Cauldron's got a pretty great voice cast. Our narrator is John Huston. What a way to start!
Yeah,
And then
that's just like throwing out there, this movie is going to be important.
Yeah, do you know who the Horned King is?
I don't remember.
John Hurt.
Oh,
As John Hurt doing any voice work is amazing, whether it be Watership Down or the narrator in the Tigger movie.
mm-hmm.
John Hurt in animation always worked.
I want to see the day that John Hurt was called about the Tigger movie, and I just want to see John Hurt in his John Hurt voice say, "I'd like to talk about Tigger."
I don't know if you noticed, it still pains me to talk about him in past tense. I like pause before I even do it. It sucks.
Yeah.
Been like, what, 3 or 4 years? Jackie was one of his last movies.
Mm-hmm.
But going on that, speaking of John Hurt's career, Freddie Jones, who people might know from The Elephant Man, or probably more so Dune, is Dolben. And then we've got Nigel Hawthorne is, what was his name? Fluter, I think?
Yeah, Fluter with 2 Fs.
Yeah.
The Fluter.
Yeah, so a really great voice cast here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another one of those cases where their voices are kind of disguised a little bit, so you can't tell right away, which is the great thing about getting recognizable voices, where you put actors in a movie and they actually get to act instead of just reading the lines.
Yeah.
Because usually you only get that in great villains, like, Vincent Price in The Way Second for George Sanders in The Jungle Book or whatever. Jeremy Irons, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, were we still on the... Is there anything else that kind of stands out as... well, yeah, as far as darkness goes, I guess you could say... what I think is interesting about Henwin is Henwin is probably one of the most lovable Disney animals. And it's like the only character... She's like the only character that doesn't speak, isn't she?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, because we kind of talked about this with the Abu and the carpet in Aladdin. Yep, there's a scene pretty early on where Henwin's almost executed. There's the scene at the very end where
not only executed, but executed by beheading.
Oh yeah, they were just ready to do it right there. They didn't care.
Disney didn't get that ballsy again until they were safe doing it in straight to DVD land with Return of Jafar.
Yeah, and let us always never forget Dr. Facilier stepping on Ray.
Oh,
When 11 years out, I still can't fucking believe they did.
yeah.
Major props for going through with that.
But, I mean, Dark Cauldron Disney would have stepped on Ray, ate him, shit him out, and stepped on him again.
Yes. So, I think that is the perfect segue to bring Gurgi into this.
Oh, Gurgi.
I believe, I can't remember the adjective he used. But there was an adjective that was really funny because Roger Ebert described Gurgi as a yes man, which I thought was hilarious.
A what?
A yes man.
I mean, he's kind of right.
Oh yeah, that's the best description since Roger Ebert described Garth Algar as somebody with the intelligence of a clever 7-year-old. There was no critic like Ebert. I know it's a cliche to say that, but it's the honest to God truth. But talking about that, yes, the climax is almost entirely solved by Gurgi basically committing suicide. So
Yeah.
after he is this little dog of sorts that probably would have been right at home in the chain message scene in 101 Dalmatians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his problem. He's just kind of a klepto, and all he cares about is food. What is it he calls them? His crunchings and munchings or something like that, or his munchings and crunchings or something.
I know, which is what I'm going to start calling my snack food.
And he's like, this dude is like, okay, he needs redemption. Okay, normally we get a scene where he's like, you know what? I'm not going to steal anybody's shit anymore. You know what? I'm going to care about more than just food now. It's like, nope, my redemption is jumping to my fiery death. And that, when we see him, now I've criticized movies in the past for having the cliche scene where the character just lays there and we're supposed to think they're dead, so we just wait for them to wake up and we're supposed to be sad like they're snakes or something.
Mm-hmm.
My Ray's death is all the more shocking because I was waiting for that the first time I saw Princess and Frog and it didn't come. But here, did you notice when they linger on Gurgi just laying there, it is for an eternity.
Yeah.
That is a long linger. That shot is like 15 seconds long. And when you're just sitting there, 15 seconds is a long time to linger.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you can bring that darkness into it.
Do you kind of feel like, I want to see if you got the same vibe I did from Dark Cauldron. I feel like the Dark Cauldron, Disney sat down and watched The Wizard of Oz and Lord of the Rings back to back.
I definitely get Wizard of Oz vibes.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was talking about that scene, when they're like it's a contrast to when we see the Horn King, and then it's Taran and Hemlin just kind of walking down the trail, and everything is green and bright.
Mm-hmm.
I can almost hear the score in my head from the Wizard of Oz when she's walking down the yellow brick road right before she meets the Scarecrow.
You know, I think there's something to my theory because I think the same year Return to Oz came out. 85, right?
I think so. I'm pretty
so
sure.
So Disney rewatched The Wizard of Oz, made the Black Cauldron, didn't like it, realized they had to cut it up, and they're like, fuck it, let's just do Return to Oz. Because there's a lot of Return to Oz vibes in this, too.
I say, now I definitely got to call bullshit on Disney being afraid the Black Cauldron was too dark. When they were doing Return to Oz the same year.
Dude, Return to Oz is fucking terrifying.
It's like, when you've got a room full of severed heads calling out Dorothy's name, the Black Cauldron isn't shit. So,
yeah.
Stick your undead army up your ass. And the wheel. Don't even the sound of the wheelers. Don't bring that shit up around. But anyway, I love how this has turned into less a comparison with Black Cauldron and the Sword of the Stone and more into the Black Cauldron versus the rest of Disney's dark shit.
Yeah. There's another thing that Dark Cauldron reminded me of that was kind of small. I want to know if you agree. The three women that they get the Black Cauldron from, do you get Casper's uncles vibes?
Not until you said it just now, and now I will never unsee it.
Your mind never would have thought to go there.
Yeah, there's that. I also kind of got a vibe of the like the fairies and Sleeping Beauty, and there's also
the Hocus Pocus witches come to mind too.
Oh yeah. Do you? I almost feel like this almost had to be intentional because it's so close. I mean, honestly, surely you get serious Seven Dwarfs vibes from the fair folk, right?
Yeah, it's like if the Seven Dwarfs with the fairies and Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, and like basically Grumpy was like the main one.
Yeah. It was like the dwarves all became like the fairies from Sleeping Beauty and they put Grumpy in charge.
Yeah.
Which now I'm starting to think that Archimedes is probably hanging around with Grumpy a little bit.
So with all this talk about the darkness...
Wait a minute. Does this mean I can't think of his last name? Night Owl and Watchman. Dan
Dryberg? Something
yeah,
like that.
Dan. Yeah. Is he a fan of the Sword and Stone?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Like, I want to see Dan Dryberg in full 80s gear sitting on his couch laughing at Merlin sliding in the modern wear. Because Dan Dryberg would do that shit.
Well, speaking of that kind of hilarity.
Mm-hmm. Which Watchmen takes place in 1985 when the Black Cauldron come out. Oh. 1985.
These things are too connected.
Yeah. We're building these little coincidences that you like to build in these videos.
We're gonna have a whole giant conspiracy going on before this is all over.
I mean, being 1985, we should have had Marty McFly travel back and tell Disney, hey, Black Cauldron ain't gonna be that bad. Chill.
Yeah, and sure enough, I'm guessing anybody could say they get Arthur Merlin vibes from Marty and Doc Brown.
Yeah.
There you go. And one has knowledge about the future.
Yeah.
We need to stop this. The world's going to implode. So, we've talked about all the darkness in the Black Cauldron, or at least a good deal of it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the comedy in the Black Cauldron? I think it's stronger than the comedy in the Sword and Stone.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more straight-faced about its comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some stuff out there, like, obviously, like, one thing that stands out immediately is there's usually a comedy sidekick. Either the hero has the comedy sidekick or the villain has the comedy sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Black Cauldron, it's both. We have Gurgi on one side and we have Creeper on the other.
Creeper kind of gives me Fidget vibes.
Definitely. By the way, the actor who voiced Fidget is the angry tree in the Wizard.
That's gonna be the word that sends the meteor hurtling to Earth. Imagine that. Imagine that was the very last thing you said before the meteor hit. By the way, Fidget's the voice of the angry tree in the Wizard of Oz.
Of course, the very last thought I will ever have in this life is that tree saying, "Are you hinting my apples aren't what they ought to be?"
You need to write one of your screenplays where a character says that right before they get a headshot. Like, it's like some henchman like having a discussion. He's like, "Hey, did you know the guy that voiced Fidget is the same guy that voiced the angry tree in the Wizard of Oz?"
Oh God. So I lost. Okay, Creeper. We were on Creeper.
Yeah, that's where Fidget came from.
Oh, excuse me. So, Great. This conversation's made me choke on my own. So I'm actually am going to die during this conversation. So anyway, do you think it's overkill to have a comedy sidekick on both sides?
Not if the kind of comedy you're going for is different.
Yeah, because
Like if it's the same joke and it's just told by two different people, then yeah, it's a little much. But if you have one side that has their own kind of joke and sense of humor, and the other side has a different one, then
yeah, because it's hard to say if they were necessarily ripping themselves off, because it's like, to my understanding, I want to say the Black Cauldron and the Great Mouse Detective were in production at the same time, despite Great Mouse being out later, because I know the Black Cauldron has some CGI worked into it, technically making it the first animated Disney release to have some CGI in it, I think. But the thing is usually
it needed it though, because Black Cauldron's ambitious as fuck.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it was a hard way to determine. A lot of people weren't sure which came first since they were worked on at the same time. But a lot of credit for the first use of CGI in an animated movie was The Great Mouse Detective at the same time, because they used it for the inside gears of Big Ben.
Yeah.
So, which I may or may not have addressed correctly or incorrectly in my Great Mouse Detective video. I can't remember for sure, but yes, to my understanding, there was confusion on who got to it first, because they were working on it at the same time, despite the fact that the Black Cauldron came out first. So there's that.
You were talking about darkness of Disney and talking about Creeper. Let's not forget, Creeper was glad his boss died.
Yeah, and I love that it takes realization first.
Mm-hmm.
So, talking about that, I do want to go into the humor that I do like in the Black Cauldron.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that Gurgi comes in with his... Gurgi to me always sounded like Donald Duck on sedatives.
Okay.
And I love
I never thought I would hear Donald Duck and sedatives used in the same sentence, but here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, because even when he was like, like in Mickey and the Beanstalk, when Donald is like starved enough that he's just practically dead, he still ends up going insane. So
yeah.
But I love the fact that Gurgi is so grating and so annoying that there is not once but twice when Taran meets him that Taran stops talking to him to just say, "Oh, never mind." I love when Gurgi comes back and Fluter is the one that comes across him.
Mm-hmm.
And we know this because he is on top of Fluter trying to get food, and Fluter is screaming, "Help! Murder!"
See, Disney has the wrong idea. Now, if Fluter would have been yelling, "Help! Rape!" that's a scene you cut.
Oh, we're in dangerous territory right now.
Who knows? The way Fluter was going after him, that might have been the first cut.
But another thing I love is just these throwaway moments. There's one throwaway line that's probably the funniest moment in the movie. Even funnier than "Help! Murder." It's when, and I don't even, is it meant to be funny? It's said "show straight." I'm not even completely sure. It's when they're trying to escape and they come across the princess and they realize they're both trying to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And just very innocently, as if it's just everyday life, the princess says, "Oh, I'm being held against my will too." And then another joke that is just so simple.
She must have had this happen like a Princess Peach level amount of times.
And once again, another joke that's just in there. It's actually kind of a childish joke too, but I feel like it's a joke you could see in any era of Disney. And it's because the animation shines is why this joke can work. It's when Fleur's chained against the wall. I think it's the first time we see him.
Mm-hmm.
And that guard's there. And he's trying to get help from him. And he's like, "You seem like an intelligent chap." And the guy turns around and has the dumbest face. It's like just how the look of this guy's face is the punchline. there's no dialogue. There's no like lingering on it. There's like nothing big to draw attention to it. Just the sight of this guy's face is the punchline.
I also love that joke's been used before, but usually a character says that about a character that we've already seen what they look like and how they are, and this is serves as a reveal.
I love how we've used reveal twice talking about the Black Cauldron. There's the reveal of this guy's dumb face versus the reveal of all the skeletons at the beginning. There's certainly a balance here. So what I would say as far as like getting to the end of this and saying like, you know, what like the message is, where it kind of starts off by saying like, you know, like it almost like it's not encouraging bravery because it could get you killed. But then there's like a greatness throughout this whole thing with the Terran character. Even though Terran doesn't seem like he would be like a particularly intriguing character by himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole idea of, remember when we did our top 15 video of all time, and one of yours was the Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how Raiders of the Lost Ark had come out 4 years before, and kids could see Indiana Jones and say, "I want to be like that." Like they imagine themselves as that, despite the fact that it's an adult like Harrison Ford. And then 4 years later, the Goonies was the chance for kids to see kids do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I feel like the great thing about Terran as a character in the Black Cauldron is that the fact that the kid in such a dark story with so many stakes and how much is just going on in general in this movie, that it's basically kids believing that they can be heroes is kind of shown throughout this movie, where Terran believes through the whole movie, because Terran is just a child.
Yeah.
And his only job is to babysit Henry.
Yeah.
And it's like, but through the whole movie, he sees himself as like, I could be that. And it's
See,
like
that's also kind of where the Lord of the Rings vibes comes from.
Yeah, and the difference is that the hero actually is a child, which makes it feel different. And it's like when kids can actually see that in that perspective, it like kind of adds this whole other sort of grand nature to it, and where the imagination can take you. But let's keep that in mind. Where the imagination can take you as far as.
Yeah. I also got Lord of the Rings vibes though, because the Horned King for some reason reminded me of Sauron.
Yeah. So is that it? Is that all we really have to say?
So which movie do you think's better?
I feel like the Black Cauldron is much better story-wise. But I feel like the Sword in the Stone might be like I don't know, because the Sword in the Stone is kind of a comfort movie to me.
I feel like whenever you're introducing a child to Disney, Sword in the Stone is what you put in to say like, hey, look at this magic. That's pretty fun, right? And then you come in with the Black Cauldron and you're like, well, take a look at this shit.
Yeah, I would say if you're like a first time parent and you're going through the whole Disney movie thing, that the Sword in the Stone would be like level 1.
Yeah.
Which is great because of how well it serves that purpose. Because there are a lot of movies that can be that easy of a watch and that pleasant of a watch, but they're just lazy about it.
Yeah.
It's like there's still something in like the animation and the way the story's told, even if there's not much of a story. There's something still in like just kind of its energy in general that makes it like it's very, very easy to digest, almost to a fault, but does exactly what it should.
I think the Sword in the Stone also does a good job of putting out a message of braids over broad.
Yeah.
Like using your know-how and your mind to get you out of situations. And it's kind of educational as shit.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that where it's like as we go through the different, it's almost like different levels. Like first they're the fish, then they're the squirrels, then he's the sparrow,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like and there's like a lesson there each time. That's the thing where it's like being episodic is not a bad thing. Even
No.
though about this criticism, like I said, my go-to example of this is The Godfather is extremely episodic,
Mm-hmm.
and did that hurt it?
I just wonder how many people have turned on the Sword in the Stone because Merlin said the Earth was round. Poor Merlin. Merlin was trying to tell us since the 60s.
So
I do love how that conversation goes though, because like taking all the jokes aside, I love how like Arthur's like, "Oh, you mean it'll get that way?" And Merlin's just like, "No, it is now." Like I love the way that Merlin has to explain things and how he has to find a way to do it. Like the very end, I think it's like one of the last lines of the movie where Merlin tells him there's going to be a motion picture made about you. And Arthur's like, well, what's a motion picture? And he's like, it's like television. It's like, yeah, he still doesn't fucking get it. Like, I wonder how many steps backwards Merlin took before Arthur realized what was going on, because he didn't have television to go off of. He didn't even have freaking pictures to go off of. Like, that conversation at some point ended with Merlin describing what a picture was.
Yeah, and it's like going all the way, assuming he didn't just give up, like when, of all places, while they were fish, he dropped helicopter.
Yeah. I just love that apparently a helicopter was enough to stick out in his mind. Like, I have a theory, too, about good old Merlin. I have a theory that the reason that he forgets so much is because he's remembering so many things from not his time.
Yeah.
Like, at first I was worried. Like, I was watching it, and I was like, is he getting dementia? And I was like, no, he's just got so much going on in there that little trivial shit just slips out. Like, of course he forgets where he is in a conversation. Motherfucker knows about helicopters and nuclear bombs and movies and whatever else he knows. And he doesn't even like it. He's like, you can take your 20th century and keep it. He doesn't like it. He's an old man stubborn for change.
That was almost, I was going to say, when you mentioned him mentioning the Earth is round,
Mm-hmm.
I almost went in the direction of, oh no, you're getting controversial again. But then I remembered, oh yeah, that's like, there's a tiny, tiny percent of people that would piss off, and they probably don't even know how to use a computer, so we're good to go.
Oh, man. We won't dive into that. That'll be an off-camera conversation.
Yep. Did you ever see the video where that, it's only like a 30-second video, but it's glorious. Where it's a guy in his kitchen who is a flat earther.
Yeah.
And he starts off his video with, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And it's like, oh, well, he just did himself in. And then this video ends with his wife walking in behind him going, oh, not this shit again. And he just turns the
No, but I've heard of videos where like people set out to prove the Earth is round or the Earth is flat. Their math shows them that it's round, and then they blame themselves for being bad at math.
So, long story short, I think the Black Cauldron is easily more impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a cop-out answer or what?
I don't think so.
But I feel like I'm more likely to revisit the Sword in the Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Just if I just need something there.
If you need some Archimedes bitching. Because Archimedes gives me Archimedes also makes me think of for Winnie the Pooh. It reminds me of putting Rabbit in Owl's body.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if a rabbit was in Owl's body, you'd have Archimedes. Which is so funny if that's the case, because in the Kingdom Hearts games, Merlin is the keeper of Winnie the Pooh's book.
All right. So
No, I haven't seen an Archimedes sighting in that game yet. In the third one, he works. In the third one, Merlin literally helps Remy the rat open a bistro.
that seems like cheating. But okay.
And then you can actually like help Remy cook shit. It's weird. They're fun little games. You should check them out sometime. Sometime when you come up and visit, I'll show you like how it works.
Just reminds me of I've been watching a lot of Gordon Ramsay videos recently. I got back into binging Hell's Kitchen for some reason.
Mm.
He was doing some Q&A, and they were just asking whatever, and one of the questions was, what's your favorite Pixar movie?
Mm.
You would think, you would think, like, does Gordon Ramsay even watch Pixar movies? His response was, is that a fucking serious question? Obviously, it's Ratatouille.
Oh man, I was hoping that being Gordon Ramsay, he'd go the other way. If he'd be like, "Is that a serious question?" It's up.
Like he'd be super aggressive, and it's the not cooking one.
Yeah. Oh man.
He's one of those few that like backs up A Bug's Life being the most underrated.
Yeah, I could see that.
All right, so
I love how the underrated is always A Bug's Life. Like no one ever dares defend Brave.
you're not gonna fucking find me defending Brave.
No, you would think like somebody like Susan who loves like women empowerment and stuff like that. Even she was like, "Yeah, Brave is boring."
And I will praise Kelly MacDonald for anything.
But
And
not Brave.
to think that she has such a heart would be cause for celebration. And I guess in theory it is, but in regards to what it is, no thanks. So we don't know. We had this one planned before we did the Bowfinger one. I don't know if we know what we know technically what our next one is, but that one's going to be a little later.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping we can get a versus out before that one comes out. I hope. So we'll see how that lands.
Yeah.
So I guess in the meantime, we'll figure out what that is at some point.
Yeah.
But you are going to help me kick off my next Stephen King series, which is going to start at the very beginning of September and go all the way through to the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
And as of October, it's just going to be full of everything. September, we're going to start getting steady new releases. I'm going to do. I have a whole bunch of new releases lined up now, like Bryan Cranston's Disney Plus movie, Jamie Foxx's Netflix movie, David Ayer's movie, all this stuff. It's not the stuff I haven't touched on yet. I'm going to like group in twos and do the new releases as like, so we can kind of fill in the gaps we've missed here.
Two? What do you mean two?
And then Bill and Ted, I believe, is next week, I think.
Bill and Ted's already coming out next week?
Yeah, it's going to, I think, select theaters and it's going to streaming. So.
Holy shit. You see where Ben Affleck's coming back as Batman?
Yes, which I honestly thought would not have happened. I kind of thought when he said he was done, I legit believed him.
Yeah, but I wonder how many actors have sat at home during this whole quarantine and been like, you know what? I kind of miss being in movies.
Yeah, so, and if I remember correctly, it's him and Keith, yeah, because of the dimensions thing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be fucking wild. That's what, 2022, I think the Flash is.
I think so.
I want to say that is also when Batman got moved, or is it October of next
I don't know. It's going to be weird to see Batman in two different movies in the same year. Like,
Yeah.
being played by two different people.
Yeah. Not as weird as having The Amazing Spider-Man and Life of Pi in the same year where we had Richard Parker in both movies.
Yeah.
And the late Irfan Khan was in both. That was interesting. But we've gone way off, so...
No, I'll bring it back to the Black Cauldron. Did you realize that Edward Herrmann's one of the directors?
Richard Rich, yes!
Yeah.
I was, and I as soon as I saw that, I was like, I hope he caught that. I really hope he caught that.
You were just starting to lose hope, weren't you?
I still think my favorite thing is that we always the Richie Rich trailer always started with Edward Herrmann saying, "Can you say Wall Street to the baby?" And Edward Herrmann is the opening narration of the Wolf of Wall Street. All right, and that'll be our last connection we make. So, we will go ahead and end this, and we'll figure out hopefully what our next one is and when that is. And yeah, and then like I said, I'm going to be working on that new release stuff. I've already watched Project Power, so we're on our way there. So yeah, so in the meantime, is that it?
I think so.
All right, let's end this.